Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the last session of what has been a fantastic 3 days, talking the future of wine tourism with a global audience and panelists from all over the world. Tourism globally is suffering unimaginable losses, and wine tourism, which is the lifeblood for so many people and industries, have come to a grinding halt. And who would have thought that in the beginning of this new decade, when we were still referring it to, can you believe it, 2020, that 3-4 months down the line, we would be dealing with closed borders and ghost towns where once cities were full of travelers. And of course, in the wine and wine tourism industry here in South Africa, we have a double whammy. We, up until about 2 weeks ago, we could not export wine, and we still can't buy or sell alcohol. So for many of us, we've run out of wine, and we now on water and tea, and we are desperately waiting for our president to give us the nod so that we can go out there and buy wine again. And other markets in the world, we've seen online wine sales boom like never before. Finally, it's like the industry and us as consumers have realized that there is something like online retail and that buying wine online is the thing. So we're going to talk wine sales, we're going to talk marketing, and we're going to talk things like social media, and I think we're going to have a nice juicy conversation with our panelists. Our aim with the webinar has been to bring together a number of global wine tourism experts, industry pioneers in wine tourism, storytellers, and just wine lovers, people who want to share some practical and thoughtful insights and interventions with the wine and tourism industry, so that together as a global family, we can navigate this very uncertain time and hopefully not just survive it, but come through this and able to thrive in what will be a very new era in travel. Certainly, it's an era, you know, for so long we've taken our freedom of movement for granted, you know, that spontaneity of being able to jump in our car with some friends and go down the road to visit a winery, or get on a plane and fly off to a beautiful destination. And that's changed. Human interaction, that thing of hugging a friend to our hearts and sharing a bottle of wine, breaking bread together, that is something that we're all yearning for. And as we start telling stories and sharing our experiences, how will that change? And how should it change? And ultimately, our story is the only unique selling point we have. So we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a good story as well. And I want to welcome our attendees and delegates from all over the world, literally all corners of the world: Canada, Spain, Portugal, Chile. I've got people here from America, the UK, and also Argentina, and of course, a lot of businesses here from South Africa. Welcome, everybody. We have a great panel joining us, literally also from all over the world, and in a few seconds, I'll introduce them to you. Just some of the key takeouts over the last few days has reaffirmed that we're dealing with a human crisis, with a human pandemic, and that all of us as human beings are intimately and intricately aware of our impact on the world and on each other. And also from a travel perspective, you know, we know that this pandemic has been fueled by traveling as well. And as the first couple of people arrived back from their overseas trips to South Africa, and we started seeing the infections rise, there was a lot of talk as well about travel being for the elite few. And we know that the travel industry has, over many years, continued in being able to be robust and recover quickly from many, many challenges thrown at us. How will we recover from this? We will recover, that I'm sure of, and we will travel again, but we will travel very differently. So join me now to welcome our panelists. With me is Mashudu Modau. He's from Lutcha, Africa, also involved in Yoko. Kash Bhattacharya from Budget Traveler, very well-known travel blogger and one of the original online storytellers that worked with me back in the day when we did the first Love Cape Town campaign. Welcome, Kash. Felicity Carter, Editor-in-Chief of Meininger's Wine Business International. Malu, Lambert, wine writer and award-winning wine writer, I must add. And then Pamela McOnie from Cape Fusion Tours, one of the original foodie and wine tourism people, I think in 20 years, right, Pam? So that she's been working in this industry. And we're going to jump straight in and start this conversation. I also want to welcome Marybeth. Marybeth is joining us all the way from Chile. Thank you, Marybeth. Marybeth Bentwood, originally from the USA, now living in Chile, and we met at the UNWTO Wine Tourism Conference back in December in Chile. COVID-19 has placed the spotlight on the importance of having a strong digital presence, and many businesses has put off developing a strong digital platform and online sale platforms for many years, and now having to fall over their feet to catch up. And we've spoken this week a little bit about the fact is it ever too late to play catch up? Can we still join this online revolution? Of course, we know that it's never too late, but there comes a time when our overdue debt of not being part of the race is almost too heavy to pay, and we're too far behind our competitors. So we need to do that right now. And the ban on wine sales should be lifted soon in South Africa, and we're predicting, like many places around the world, to see a huge increase in wine sales. Mashudu, what should businesses do right now to gear themselves up to participate in this disrupted buying cycle, which is not new and shouldn't have been new, but for many businesses, it's very new terrain and quite scary?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think it's a very difficult time to be an entrepreneur, to be a small business in many industries, and also in the wine industry. And I think Yoko put out this report around 2 weeks ago, which really reported that the lockdown and quarantines, the impact of it on small businesses was that about 80,000 businesses that use Yoko were not transacting. And this is a trend that we've seen not just in South Africa, but globally as well, where businesses are effectively just shut down. Mm. And this brought about this massive movement of people going, okay, how can we trade and continue to serve customers without having to open out our doors and make sure that we're in their faces? So creating these online platforms. So for example, there's been a massive shift and move towards building online stores, making sure that your social media is way more invested in. So you're really investing a lot more into your Instagram, into your Facebook, into building out communities for your product and your services, so that this doesn't affect you as much as most other businesses. Mm-hmm. I think building out online stores is going to become a really massive trend, mainly because I think small businesses didn't necessarily feel that they had the ability to serve larger customers and look at the market in a holistic sense. It was always about, my local community and trading with the people that are closest to me. But now everyone's thinking, how many more people can I serve right now from where I am in my locale? And how much more impact can I have on a national, on a provincial, on a global scale as well? And I think that's really what's going to happen next is entrepreneurs and small businesses need to start investing in channels that are more digital, channels that are more, that rely less on physical spaces and meeting people in person. I think one really a massive marker that shows you the power and impact of online sales is something like Bottles, which is a platform in South Africa for buying alcohol and wine online. And they've had insane growth, right? So in the first 2 weeks of quarantine, where trade was still allowed on online platforms, they had an incredible surge of about 300% in terms of sales. And this shows you that people are hungry in order to buy things online, especially the things that they really care about and want. And this includes wine as well. And trends like this will continue. And I see way more platforms for wine consumers to want to, buy from the makers that make it as well.
And what would be your advice for a small business right now that is realizing, okay, well, that's obviously where future growth is. And if I want to run this race, particularly now post-COVID and lockdown, I need to get in there. But it's quite daunting particularly for small businesses. Is it hard to get online? And what would be the first step and your kind of word of advice and hope for a small business?
Cool. So this advice is applicable globally. This is what I'm happy about. So our new startup is called Compass, and what we do is we build online stores for small businesses to help them scale the work that they're doing in their physical stores into online presence. And what we found is a way to really take, a process that takes a few days where you're trying to build the store yourself, and you really breaking it down to about 2 hours or so. So we actually built a guide to help small businesses do this. Literally, all you need is Shopify. So this really allows you to build an online store, have payments sorted out, as well as start to integrate sort of your logistics and stuff like that. Shopify, I think, is a very underrated small businesses to get online, start transacting, be able to make those sort of transactions as soon as possible. So if you are from South Africa, unfortunately, our guide is very specific to South Africa. So you can go to compass.africa, and we actually have an entire guide that breaks down how to build an online store from start to finish. I don't believe it's complicated. We've tried to simplify it as much as possible, because I think this is something that most entrepreneurs don't want to stress about, is handling a new channel, but not understanding how to use that channel best. So I think compass.africa, you can go through the full guide, and you'll be able to start your online store, install your payment systems, be able to partner with something like a Africa, for example, that provides logistics and deliveries in South Africa, and be able to start trading immediately. So I think that's a really the best recommendation.
Fantastic. And that's the kind of advice we need right now. I think it's quite daunting for a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs, and it's important to break the problem down into manageable little chunks and say, you know what, this is the first step. So that's great advice. Marybeth, I want to come to you. And Chile, like South Africa, has a fairly underdeveloped local market. We've been focused a lot on our export market. Our wines are loved around the world. We do sell about 50% of our wine produced here in South Africa, but it's to a very specific segment of the market still. How are you using this crisis in Chile to change the perception of wine as a category and helping the industry adjust their offering to be more local friendly from an operational perspective, but also from a marketing and a kind of a wine perception perspective? And we've got similarities in many ways, and the category of wine potentially is quite daunting for many locals.
Yeah, Chile doesn't have a wide wine culture. It's very segmented. Chile exports the majority of its wine. Over 90% of its wine is exported. And developing the local market has always been an interest, and done by a few wineries. Part of that is taxes. The domestic wine market is highly taxed. So you can actually buy wine cheaper from Chile in the United States than you can in Chile. Wow. And it's a big pisco and beer market. That said, there's never been a better time to develop it because everybody's at home. And, wine is the great uniter. It brings people together. And that I have seen widely leveraged. I think, there's been certainly some stars. Country Toro has an incredible research facility in Malu, and they transitioned that into a COVID research center so they could be testing COVID there. I was looking at Emiliana, which is the world's largest organic wine producer, was able to sell as much wine in April as they did last year, simply by changing their supply chain. So in Chile, they had people on motorcycles delivering wine. And people have leaned in very heavily, obviously, to social media. And I think what is fascinating about this time is there have been pandemics in the past, but nothing that has had this much coverage because of social media. Everything is being broadcast all the time, and you have to have a voice there. And I don't believe it's ever too late to start. But what I think is often overlooked is email. And so Twitter, Instagram, TikTok are amazing. They give you incredible creativity, but you don't own those platforms. What you own is a spot in someone's inbox if you've earned it. And that will stay with them. So wineries that had email lists, as you've seen in the United States, have really been able to lean into that. And of course, Chile's also doing virtual tastings. And what I'm seeing now also are pre-sales. So people are looking toward the future, toward October, September, and pre-selling, especially hotels at wineries, visits, entering into that with a money-back guarantee. So if we're not open in October, then we give your money back. And you have to plan for the future and start creating offers that have a way for you to change it, but also give the consumer something to look forward to and to participate with you in.
Right. And as we said in our previous session earlier today, we're craving that opportunity to get into our car and go down to a winery with a few close friends and enjoy the natural beauty, certainly that the Western Cape has to offer, and many other places around the world. I mean, as more and more people around the world realize wine is grown in really beautiful places in the world. And of course, that region has a lot more to offer than good wine. It's always comes back to the people and their stories and the experience that they bring brands to life and products to life. And in the end of the day, of course, when you see that brand on the shelf again, you will grab it because there's something that resonates with you, because you have an experience and a story to remember. And there's good storytellers and there's great storytellers. Kash, you've been in the online storytelling space for a long time, and one of the first professional travel bloggers. And as budget traveler, you work primarily within the budget travel space. And of course, a hostel isn't a hostel these days. They are designer, no-frills hotels and some of my favorite places to stay in the world. What are your predictions for influencer marketing? This is another hot topic always. People either love it or hate it, and everybody's trying to get on the bandwagon, and online campaigns post-lockdown. Do you think there's a future for it? Will influencer marketing change, and how?
Yes. Greetings, first of all, to everyone from sunny Berlin. Thank you for having me here, Mariette. Influencer marketing, the hot topic that always provokes fierce debate. I think pre-COVID, there was a bit of fatigue kicking in, and I think the crisis has actually seen a rebirth in many ways of influencer marketing, because as was pointed out just now, that there's been a huge increase in engagement online. People are spending so much time on their phones, consuming data while they're waiting at home. And I think this need for trusted sources, because trust has been a topic that's been mentioned in all the webinars. I think this is something that the good influencers, the real influencers, have this commodity of trust, of giving people the right information. And I think once we emerge out of this phase and we start planning our travels again for the end of this year, 2021, people will be looking at influencers for information. And I hate the word influencer, but I guess that's one way you could describe the work I do. But I think we're a pretty hardy race of people. We're the first people to travel. I've already spoken amongst all my colleagues in the industry, and everybody's like waiting for the borders to open, and they will be the first people to travel. And I think with the way the media industry has suffered in the crisis, budgets decreasing also in the media sector, the influencers will be the first people who will be flexible enough to go and travel to South Africa. So I think there's a huge opportunity there that given the first person perspective that influencers can offer through mediums like Instagram stories or maybe TikTok. I'm not too sure on TikTok, but we can talk about that later. But I think that first person perspective of rebuilding confidence, that this is how the hotels are tackling the situation, this is how the destination is creating the experience, this is how social distancing looks like, just giving people that kind of ease of mind. That's where the influencers will be so important. So I think, yes, there's going to be a huge boom in online campaigns. There's so much potential there. And yeah, the destinations that are the first to embrace that and use the influencers, both internationally and also locally, because I also think that's another thing that a lot of destinations, I know that in South Africa, with a lot of the work you've done, Mariette, you've really embraced the local influencer community. And I think they are the pillars of the recovery, because they are the local voices that the communities also listen to. So involving them initially and then bringing in international influencers and building the story from there will be important.
And as we said earlier this week, you know, influence has also changed. You know, ultimately, we all know that the ultimate influencer is ordinary people, me and you. It's consumers, right? And that will always be the fact, you know. And the spotlight has moved slightly off the celebrity influencer to people that we can relate to better, right? People that perhaps, you know, the fancy terms micro influencers, whatever you want to call it, but it's the mom who's trying to juggle homeschooling and desperate for a glass of wine at the end of the day, right? Who's hearing me here? Marybeth, Malu, I mean, I narrate, we're all in that game right now. And, you know, so it's about storytelling ultimately. It's about telling stories that other people can relate to. And as people in the tourism and in the wine industry, we need to kind of get off that very perfect story chair and start opening up and getting a little bit more real in terms of storytelling. Isn't that right, Kash?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're moving away from a more perfect, idealized world, which I think has been the issue with many people who call themselves influencers in the past. They present a picture perfect reality. And I think transparency is going to be so important in this new post-COVID era. People will want to know the exact reality of what they can expect in the destination. And they will want real stories. They will want you to tell them the stories of the challenges you face. They will want you to see your joy and your expression of happiness, but they will also want to know exactly what to expect. And I think that is so important. With the right influences, you get the right level of transparency and openness. And I think it also makes you more endearing to follow. And I always try to do that. I always present the destination the way I see it. And I try and put in those wonderful pictures of wine sunsets, holding up my glass of wine and enjoying those moments. But I also will tell stories of nightmares that I face on my travels. So I think marketing and influencer marketing will have to have a more human face. And I think that's where picking the right influencers who are relatable, who are personable, with the right personalities, those are the people that you should be looking towards when you look to tell the story of your brand or destination.
Exactly. A good fit, right? And someone who shares the ethos of the brand. That's great advice. Felicity, as more and more businesses turn to online marketing and sales and consumers get more and more overwhelmed by choice, what, in your opinion, are some of the key lessons that you can share with the wine tourism sector that will help them stand out amidst this kind of online clutter? There's so much clutter and noise, and then you add social media to the mix and we all get very confused. It's ultimately about standing out.
Well, actually, before you even get to that stage, I think people should be thinking about the stage before, which is logistics. Because here in Europe, I've been reading some research reports, and they're actually quite interesting. Everyone's realised that they have to suddenly embrace digital. But what businesses have not been set up for is how they fulfil the orders. And this has turned out to be really, really onerous for many wineries, that they especially in areas where labour is expensive, they don't have the labour to be answering the phone all day or monitoring the web all day. And then when they fulfill the order, it might only be 3 bottles, and freight is really expensive. So you have to think very carefully about how you're going to build your shop in such a way that it doesn't actually cost you more to do. This is a really great time to invest in digital for a couple of reasons. One is that everybody's going digital, and the second is because of, it's a very unfortunate reason, but because of the economic collapse that we're seeing, particularly in the United States, it's much easier and cheaper to buy people to help you, or to hire people to help you, than it ever has been in the past, and to get really high quality people who know a lot about DTC to do this. But first of all, you have to think about how you're going to fulfill. And one of the best case studies I've seen are actually people who consider collaborating with neighbours or inside their region, to think about how you can build a regional online platform, or how you can build it with your neighbours, so that it takes the burden off every individual winery to fulfill by yourself, because some wineries actually find that quite crushing. So that's my advice. My advice would be, first of all, really, really invest. This is the moment to invest. There will never, ever be a better time to get top level expertise on the case of, you know, setting you up for the future. Secondly, before you do it, before you think about marketing and all those things, think about how you're going to fulfill those orders. And thirdly, think about collaborating with your neighbours. That's a really powerful thing to do.
I love the, we had some practical examples just here around us. You know, of course, I live with a chronic kidney disease, and I really am trying not to get, you know, where there's too many crowds around. And so I've been using small online retailers from the get-go. In fact, I've been using it for a few years. But it's been wonderful to see small local producers starting to build these networks of collaboration. So in other words, I am now ordering my fresh produce from a farm in Elgin, but they're also throwing into the mix some of the cheese from their neighbors, the pies from another neighbor, and hopefully soon the wine from another neighbor. And that's the kind of solutions we want. We've got to build these networks, as you say, because that helps us. We can put our efforts together. We can put our resources together, if it's financial resources or whatever. And yes, that's Terra Madre in Elgin. They deserve a shout out. So yes, I think that what you're saying is spot on. We've got to do our homework. We've got to get our infrastructure right, but we've also got to look who around us can we collaborate and partner with so that our offering is a little bit more sustainable and working.
The other thing I would say, it's really strange out of left field, but if you've got accommodation on your property, make sure that you're really telling everybody about that, because what's happened in the last, since this happened, is wine tourism has been driven to a large extent by cheap airfares and by Airbnb. And Airbnb is in a whole world of pain right now for a whole lot of reasons. And a lot of people who had Airbnb properties are going broke because they took mortgages, they took leases. So a lot of Airbnb properties are being pulled off the market and put into the long-term lease market. So actually that cheap accommodation is vanishing. And it was an engine of wine tourism. So if you've got accommodation, splash it everywhere, put it all over your website, talk it up, make sure it's in all of your social media, because that will really help you rebuild tourism as well.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Accommodation and good value accommodation, particularly self-catering accommodation in many cases, will be in hot demand. Malu, I want to come to you. You're an award-winning wine writer. What makes a good story, and how can small businesses in particular get their stories out? I mean, as I said before, it's our unique selling point. It's the only thing that really differentiates us from the guy next door. And we're all trying to get smart and, you know, efficient about our online sales and, you know, get our technology right. But essentially, when me and you are going to choose between two places to go and visit or two bottles of wine to drink, the guy with the best story is going to win my loyalty.
Hi, Mariette. And yes, no, thank you. I think you're 100% right there. A couple of touch points that we've already touched on there. The people want real stories now. I think the words luxury and glamour are actually going to be quite distasteful as we move into the future. And I think marketing brochures, just glossy marketing brochures, are also are not going to be okay. We need to find authenticity, transparency. We need to strip away that filter. But that being said, it needs to be visually literate. We have to enter a space where we can be real, but considered and beautiful, because I still like looking at nice things. I still like engaging with beautiful things. So to be real doesn't mean you show all the, the joint holes and the whatever. It means show the real story. So, I mean, that's the first one. And then also, what is storytelling? I've been thinking about it this morning, and information and storytelling are two separate things. Storytelling, you give meaning to information. And that's our job as storytellers, to give meaning and to find that meaning. And we find that meaning within our own brands by making connections that weren't previously connected. So, for example, I think, this whole pandemic has given brands an opportunity to really not wipe the slate clean, but re-look at their marketing and their storytelling. There's a lot of fatigue, I think, in the way things have been done. Copy, paste, PR, advertorials, that kind of thing. Now, what is your story? How do you really tell it, and how do we separate it from the crowd? I think there's a huge rise in individualism, and also like the small beautiful things that set you apart. Like Bhattacharya springs to mind. Their lovely little Fynbos shop they have in their winery, and you only know about it when you actually visit their winery. Why isn't this more present in their marketing? When we start getting, home deliveries, hopefully soon, we need to create that story a little bit more. A great example of this is Wolfgat. I'm sure some of us have seen his beautiful box with the watercolor of the seascape. You know, that didn't cost as much as a thick glossy brochure. I know that. It cost time, it cost thoughtfulness, but immediately that person who's opening that box is transported there, and he's, you know, the person sees the care at which it was done. People want to feel cared about, they want to feel heard, and they want to feel connected. So that's how I think you tell a good story, is it's right in front of you. But to be a little bit more practical, for brands, I think you need to ask yourself a series of questions. First of all, who are you? And really strip away pretense here. Really, who are you? What is your brand? What is your message? And then you need to figure out what you want to say. And then most important, and everyone always seems to forget this one, is what are you actually trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve sales? Are you trying to achieve community engagement? What is it you want? Figure out what you want from the marketing and story you put together first, and then craft your message. I think that's quite important.
I love that. I love that, the element of care that must come in, and that's that delivery box that Kobus of Wolfgat has put together. It's such, you know, it's such a simple but such a heartfelt, and I think that's the word. We need to get a little bit more heartfelt about and intentional what we're doing. Next up, I want to come to. Just want to quickly. There we go. Just everybody mute yourselves there. Then we get into it. Are you hearing me well? Good. Mashudu, you help brands create online content through podcasting. Okay, so that's another thing that has boomed over the last few months and years is podcasting. Should brands consider a podcast, and why, and what makes a good podcast?
Cool. So I think the focus really when it comes to content creation and also publishing should always be building a community, right? And I think that's going to be a really, really great differentiator from everything else that's happening on the internet, is how much of a good community can you build around the thing that you're talking about or the thing that you're building. I think there would be a really, really amazing opportunity to build out way more communities around not just podcasting, but podcasting, video, and everything else, specifically around wine and experiences like that, right? So because we can't all come together in one room as much right now, it's going to be so much more important to create those virtual experiences where people can sort of connect on some level. So I think podcasting is a phenomenal medium, mainly because you can build a really strong community of people that deeply care about what you're speaking about. And also they won't just be coming to you to listen and just, you know, go off and do their own thing, but it will be very, very engaging. I think that's something that we've learned around podcasting, is it really forces a lot more engagement. It forces a lot more community, a lot more, hey, I listened to the podcast, but what are your thoughts on this? How can I use this in a different way? What more can I do with the information you've given me and the experience as well? I think a lot more people should be looking at podcasting, not just for their brands, but for the communities that they're trying to build around the thing that they're doing. I don't think I've seen enough wine-focused content or wine tourism-focused content yet from the podcasting end. There are bits and pieces of it, but I think there's a really massive opportunity where you can sort of put together the wine, the podcast with YouTube, as well as some written content, to try and build a really good learning experience that's more holistic and not sort of focused on one medium only.
Exactly, and also more real. I mean, adding on to what Malu was saying, you know, a good story, and these days people's attention span is very, very limited. You know, online we've got like 7-8 seconds, and if we don't crack it, then people move on. You know, where once they've moved through your channels, they enjoying listening to you, and you have a podcast. That's where you really get to have more in-depth conversations with your community, as you say. So I think that's a really valuable point, and we'll get back to that. I want to come to you, Pamela. You have been in the food and wine tourism industry for close to 20 years, and have been running your foodie tours in the Western Cape for a long time. So you engage and you tell stories and all day long. What do you think from a trust perspective, obviously being our most valuable currency, as we've said before, it's plays such a huge role in the buying decision. How can small businesses in particular gear themselves up for more business post-lockdown? How do we, as smaller businesses, make sure we stand out, using what we've heard today a little bit better and working together a little bit more?
I think, hi everybody, just to start. Basically, from my perspective, and after having listened for quite a few days, I think the same message is coming through extremely strongly, that we need to communicate better. And I think we haven't been very good in terms of the wine industry, in terms of the digital strategy, which keeps coming out. And we need to use every single manner that we can communicate going forward. So from your website, having a little button saying, you know, why will you feel safe coming to visit us, through to your posts sitting on Instagram, on Facebook, on podcasts, how you're gearing up to change for when the local market come and visit you. From a tour operator point of view, for us coming and taking wine tours through to you in the future, I think the fact that many of us have a long reputation is also going to lead to the trust point coming through. So people are going to trust that their agent in America has chosen an operator who will choose wine estates where their guests will feel safe. So the trust equation is going to go all the way through. The other thing that is really superb to see in the industry is we are being very thorough with our protocols. They're starting to come all the way through. They're starting to feed all the way through. So that should create some extra trust in the industry, because that's going to be spread all over, that we're going to have a uniform way of making sure that things and protocols are carried out going forward. So yeah, I think it's all about relationships, and it's all about speaking to people and doing the podcasts and all the rest. So I would agree with absolutely every way that everybody has said on the trust. Just while I've got it.
When we chatted, before the session started, you mentioned the need for, as a sector, for us to work closer together, and it's been mentioned repeatedly here. Just practically, what would you do differently as Cape Fusion Tours, because sometimes we sit and wait for someone else to orchestrate that, and we think it's the job of a tourism board to put a network together. But what are you as a business, how will you be operating differently post-lockdown to make sure that you establish that kind of sense of network and community?
Yeah, you know, the thing is that when I was listening on the first few days, I was thinking, you know, the wine estates really haven't reached out to the tour guides and the tour operators for many years. It used to be very easy for us to have those relationships because we were much smaller. We had a lot less tourists that were coming. And so I thought about it more, and I thought, you know what, it needs to come from both ways. We need to go and sit down and say, we want those stories. We want to be part of your network. I think that the wine estates need to realize that we're an extension of their brand. We are the storytellers that choose which estate people are going to. So we need to know the stories. We need to know the people. We need to know the winemakers to be able to say hi as we go in. We need to know, you know, that we could possibly have brainstorming sessions every 6 months with some of the guys like Fairview as to how do we make this better? How do we create a brand that we're working very much hand in hand? And I think there's been a disconnect with the tour guides and the tour operators, and people sort of, maybe because we moved into the mass tourism spectrum at the end of the day, but never before is it going to be more important that we understand what your products are. And there's so many means now for us to hold Zooms towards the end of the year. We'll also watch what you guys are going to be doing with the local market and to see what we can do, because it doesn't look like our borders are going to be open before January. I also think collaborations between the tour operators, the restaurants, the winery is really important. it was really cool. One of the guys that wrote a book was on a few days ago, and he was saying it's not just about wine tasting, and that's what I've been saying for years. You cannot go from one farm to the next, to the next, to the next to drink wine. You want to go for the experiences. Like you've got Boschendal behind me. It's not just the wine, it's remembering the beautiful walk in this garden, the visit to the pigs at the bottom of this garden down here, the beautiful Cape Dutch architecture. And we lose sight of going into regions. We're marketing a story of a region, which then creates the relationship of, I remember my very, very happy time of visiting the beautiful Stellenbosch region for a magnificent lunch, a wine tasting, a walk on Babylon's Turn, a visit to Glen Colley's art gallery. And all of those experiences will be the spark when I see the South African wine, when I walk down an aisle, and I'll remember all those happy, happy, happy memories, and I'll start experimenting and ordering when I see an email or an Insta or a tweet going, well, you can now get our South African wine in the area. And we see it all the time. These guys go back as huge ambassadors from South Africa to tell all of their friends about how magnificent our wine is, what beautiful value, but for money, but how beautiful this region is. And it steals a part of their heart. And people come back and back again. Last quick little point, we need to focus on that local market. I've been screaming it for years. Why are we closing wineries at Saturday at lunchtime? If I've been working all week and I've now got to do the shopping and the banking, I'm not waking up at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning going, I need to go and drink wine. So we need to make it accessible. I've had clients in the past who looked at me, Aussies, who said, oh, you're completely mad. The cheapest sale is to the local consumer. So have picnics on the farms where people can buy your bottles of wine and have happy memories sitting under your trees. We have the space to do this and to create those relationships with the locals. We should be doing more over weekends.
That's a great point. Before we go into the debate, I see on the chat there's a bit of a debate going on about is TikTok appropriate or not appropriate. I'm going to save that one for a little bit later. I want to just add to what Pamela has been talking about, which is how do we repackage our wine tourism offering for the local market. You know, we know that the first green shoots of recovery will be within the local and the domestic markets. And we know that we've been potentially really focused mostly on the international market. And whether that's right or wrong, that's not what we're debating here. We're debating what are we doing going forward and how do we crack this domestic nut. So pricing has come up several times over the last few days. Kash, you focus on budget travel, and of course with budget it doesn't necessarily mean it's cheap, but it focuses a lot on value, and I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about that. But how important will price and value be post-lockdown, and what impact do you think this will have on the budget travel market? Any interesting trends you see that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think what people will be looking for when, as you said, most of travel at the moment is very domestic focused, but there is a very sizable number of people who are very risk averse, who will be looking to travel at the first opportunity. And what they will be looking for is a combination of things. They will be looking at a country, a destination that offers high quality, amazing value for money experiences. They'll be looking at the ease of travel to get there, how cheap are the flights. And they'll be obviously looking how far will their money go in the destination. And in all three aspects, South Africa, I think, ticks all the boxes, because I've been seeing flight offers from Lisbon for 370 euros return throughout the year on various dates to Johannesburg, which I think is an incredible value. So I think that there's, contrary to what many people are saying, I still think international flying will still be cheap, because the airlines will be desperate to lure travelers back to traveling. So the flights will be incredible value, I think. And I think when you pair that with a destination like South Africa, you've got the perfect package. And in terms of trends, I definitely see people traveling less. So instead of having 2-3 big holidays a year, they'll have the one big holiday a year. But the good thing about that is that they'll be spending more time in the destination and spending more money and time. So that's where I think South Africa has the perfect opportunity, because you have such a great variety of experiences, from beautiful coastline to great wine to nature. And that leads me on to the next point, is that we've all kind of reconnected with our local neighborhood and nature and going on long walks. This has been a big feature in Europe, where people have been allowed to go within a short radius of their house, and everybody's been going into nature, and social distancing is easy in nature. And I think that's also where South Africa has a wealth of amazing natural beauty, where social distancing holidays are easy to do. And you have all that space on the wine estates in nature. So it's social distancing holidays comes easy to South Africa. So I think that's going to be huge. And more people will be traveling with loved ones, families. So family travel is going to be huge. So it won't be just a couple, it'll be multi-generational travel. So that's the other thing that you have to think about when you're doing your marketing.
That's great. And Marybeth, we spoke earlier in the week about women and wine, women and travel. Women make a lot of the decisions when it comes to buying wine and, of course, buying the next travel experience as well. How can we make wine and wine tourism more relevant for women? What role do you think do women play also in terms of the marketing and the sales channel of wine and wine tourism?
Provide a babysitter at your winery. I think women in the United States make the majority of day of wine purchases, like 75%. And if you look at TikTok right now, #moms of TikTok, the big question is, how early is it? When is it too early to start drinking? So I think women are the purchasers for the household. And the more you nail who the woman is you're serving, the better you're going to be able to communicate to her and solve her problems. And to me, it gets down to the smallest viable market and owning that market with intention. And intention for me goes deeper than authenticity. Intention is, how do you want to represent your values to them? And I think, we are all traveling through this COVID portal right now, and we're going to come out on the other side different than we were before. And people will ask us as brands, what did we do during this time for our employees, for our community, for others? And they should. The channels of communication keep incredible transparency and a historical record of what we're doing. So I think that's really important to nail that intentionality. And if women is your market, then bringing them meaning. And you don't have to just bring them recipes. It's great if you can bring them recipes. And these virtual wine tastings, wine is 5 minutes of the conversation, and then it has to go beyond that and add value that represents your brand. If you're a biodynamic winery, bring your winemaker to me and have him teach me how to increase energy efficiency in my own garden, right? Bring value to the rest of my life. And I am going to show up for you because you're speaking to me in a way that makes a difference. And I think there's so many points in this conversation that I feel really nail it, that I just want to touch while I have this opportunity. The opportunity right now to build the best team you ever have is once in a lifetime. The talent that's available to you is incredible. At the same time, we really have to be so aware of costs, because once wineries open, the labor costs of serving clients in a new way is going to be high for much less sales at the cellar door. And I want to encourage wineries to focus on the local market, because that's what's going to come back. And we're talking about that. And that local market, it's going to be local, and then domestic, and then international. And ways you can serve that local market, you can be incredibly creative. It could be a box of wine and a picnic to go. It doesn't have to even be at the winery. They're getting out in nature. It could be at the winery, it could be elsewhere. And that's where you have that opportunity to leverage your local ecosystem and working with farmers. And invite people with a handwritten note. Send a letter. Could you imagine receiving a letter from a winery? Because I visited once before. Marybeth, we'd love to come visit. We'd love for you to come visit. Signed the winemaker or signed the CEO. Those personal touches are going to make a huge difference. So choose your communication with intention. Choose the channels that you're going to communicate in, because you can't use all of them simultaneously well, unless you already are doing that. And fail forward, meaning don't be afraid to make mistakes, but make them with the intention of communicating why you started this winery, and show up for people in that way.
Absolutely. I think it's beautiful to start having that conversation of getting a little bit more real and adding value to people. You know, we've been so obsessed with getting that sale through at all costs that we have become quite plastic also in our marketing and in the sales process. Felicity, as you said, there's a clear link between increased wine sales and wine tourism. How do you think will this be affected by the pandemic, and how should we package wine tourism and sell wine tourism differently post-lockdown? I mean, it's one thing getting excited about the increase in online wine sales, but how are we making sure that this ecosystem of wine tourism, the small businesses, benefit as well from this new surge in online, and how we're repackaging wine tourism? And we've spoken about the local market in this. I just want to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, the most difficult thing at the moment is nobody has a clue about what the market is going to look like. It could be, especially with airlines, it could be that airlines are actually going to be really expensive for the next couple of years. It could be that people don't want to get on a plane because, they're disease vectors. So it's going to be really difficult. So I think the only way to hedge against this incredible uncertainty, because on the one hand, there's pent-up demand with people wanting to come back and experience nature. On the other hand, there are all these infrastructure problems that may or may not be solved, is to have a tiered offering, to think about what you can offer at all different price points to match. You must cultivate the domestic market. That's something that wineries haven't really done, and they're really going to need to do that. So this is a time to think about booking software like Redzi, where you can you can smooth the curve by offering different things and getting people to sign up. The other thing that has really disappeared in the pandemic is this sense of trust, and I find it really interesting that I'm in Germany, and lockdown has been removed, and supposedly when you go into businesses, people are supposed to wear masks and stuff like that. It's very interesting that some business owners are kind of like, you can take your mask off because I know you and I trust you, which is completely bizarre, because just because you know somebody doesn't mean they're not going to infect you. But there's this very strong sense now that you need to know people before you get close to them. So the way I would market is very much based on trust, and we're a family, we took care of our employees, we're going to take care of you as well. I'd also be a little bit cautious. Everybody is going to have to talk about their protocols and whatever, but I'd be a little bit cautious of waving too many bottles of hand sanitizer around on social media, because you don't want to put the danger back into people's heads. You want to make everybody feel trust. But basically, in a time of where nobody knows if the wine trade, tourism trade is going to snap back or not. And if it does come back, it might not be 2023. First of all, have tiered offerings, start to have a good booking system so that you know how many people are coming at any given time, and absolutely think a lot about how you can serve the domestic market. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
That's great. I want us to just pause a little bit longer on the domestic market and local market. Now, in a country like South Africa in particular, we don't have, when we say our local market, it's not as simple as, it's not one group. We speak about a multi-diverse audience, and an audience that for many, many years have been left out of the tourism game and the wine game, etc. And here we are turning to our local market, and we say, please come and be welcome. But there's a lot of people in South Africa who do not feel that they are welcome to visit certain tourism establishments or the winelands for that matter, and that might be reality or perception. That's besides the point. And I want us to talk a little bit about how do we reposition in a country like South Africa wine tourism for it to be more inclusive. And it's a loaded question and a difficult question. And I want Pamela, if maybe you can add to that, Mashudu, whoever wants to add to this, let's talk about it. It's something that's come up on the chat group as well, and we need to deal with it. We had quite a nice discussion about this on Wednesday afternoon, very robust discussion on this, and some beautiful things that came out of that in terms of how do we make our product offering more relatable and tell our wine story also in the vernacular, in the local languages of our own people. So I'd love to hear more from a wine tourism experience. How do we make it more relatable and accessible to ordinary South Africans? Pamela.
Cool. Thanks very much, Mariette. I think one of the biggest faults, and it has come out quite a few times before in your last few days, is making it more real and in a way that people can actually approach wine. I think the wine industry in general around the world has turned it into quite an intimidating industry and not an all-inclusive industry. And as a result, a lot of the guests who get into my tour, and my other tour guide friends will tell you the same, they apologize for coming on a wine tour because they don't have enough knowledge about wine. How did we get to a point that people are actually intimidated to go on a wine tour because they think the guide is actually going to judge them on their wine knowledge? And so there have been some amazing guys that have come on board and chatted over the last few days of saying, do things that make the local market feel welcome. Do an African food and wine pairing. You know, do little potjies, do, little meat dishes that go with things with African flavors, or do a roosterbrood, which is a delicious toasted sandwich, pairing, things that are not intimidating, that people go, oh my God, yum, let's go over to there and book for something that is less intimidating, and let's go and learn a little bit. And I think the role, once again, you go with having guys that are doing online webinars and things, or I don't know, all sorts of things where they're doing tastings, where they're just regular everyday guys who are out there as influencers and saying, man, this stuff is just delicious. You've got to try the Cabernet Sauvignon from here. It goes really well with, the pig trotters, anything that starts getting the people realizing, oh, actually, maybe this is not so scary. Why don't I go and experiment and go and try out there? So I think relatable, going real stories. I think we lost track as a wine industry in terms of telling those stories. Unless you go to that wine farm, you don't know who owns it. You don't know anything about the background and the struggles of that guy. So becoming real, making it approachable. I love the ideas of collaborations with the restaurants. When the restaurants start running again, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen the Abelobi fish guys have a little scanner thing on the menu. You can scan and you can see who the fisherman was who caught your fish that's about to land on your plate. I mean, it'd be really, really cool to have a little snap, and then you get a little story from Malu about that winemaker and the wine that you're sitting with. And it just adds so much more to the experience than just knowing it's a Del Air cab that's sitting in front of you, which is going to be yummy with my steak. I actually start interacting. And the other idea that was amazing is taking the wine experiences to people and to communities, local restaurants, where they can meet the winemaker, they can taste the different varietals. More of that sort of stuff needs to go in our market. And by making it more accessible, you will start getting more of your consumers that are not wine drinkers drinking, which might start heightening the interest. So they will have more people that come and start studying wine at the end of the day. Nziki, who you had on your last session, she's amazing. She got a bursary to study wine and she'd never tasted a drop in her life. Her granny wanted to kick her out the house because of evil drinking alcohol. So it's the guys that have moved forward like that you can take it back into communities and start spreading the word. Because at the moment, I don't think becoming a winemaker is on the radar of so many people in many communities, because traditionally we're a beer market, whiskey, vodka, brandy, and we just don't have a lot of people drinking wine locally. It's been changing over time, but it's a slow process.
Absolutely. And I think making the category of wine more accessible and bringing it down to earth. Mashudu, just from your side, you know, using online platforms and things like podcasts and influencers, how do we, you know, we've got great example through the Joburg Wine Club of kind of demystifying the category of wine and just having fun with it. You know, we also get very careful about this topic of black and white and local and not local and international and domestic and prices, etc. And we get very careful. But what are your opinion? How do we demystify this perhaps quite complex topic of wine and wine tourism?
Yeah. So I think it's really, again, goes back to what I was saying around building our community. So using content to reach out into the communities that you haven't reached before, right? So I think about content creation and content development and all of that really as a way to build our community. So what you're really trying to do is reach into the communities that you haven't tapped into with what you're currently offering by creating educational content, right? So what was mentioned just right now was around pairing different wines with different foods and stuff like that would really build out a more educational experience, right? So for example, really teaching people what it means, you know, how to taste wine the right way, what different names actually mean, going very, very bare bones basic, right? And also including a lot more people that people are more familiar with in terms of mass media or possibly, right? So really partnering with possibly influencers and stuff like that to go, hey, let's do something like a public wine tasting online, on Instagram, on Zoom, on, you know, Periscope, and really show people, you know, there's not this, you know, glove of just this curtain of sophistication. Like, bring that down and really educate people about what wine is, how it works, why people should care about it, why it's much better than, you know, other options. I think it really goes down to educating people as much as possible, but doing it in the way that they can learn more, right? So whether it's a podcast or YouTube channel, Instagram video, a live session, whatever it is, really trying to reach people where they are, educating them as much as possible to really bring them to the level that you want them to be, which is really becoming way more passionate and wanting to know more and share more about this passion as well.
Exactly. So, you know, talking about, let's get back to the topic of print and digital and social media. In recent days, Malu, we've seen a number of print publications close down, not just here in South Africa, but around the world. What, in your opinion, is the future of print, and how can we ensure that good content lives on, or is it going to be all about TikTok and Insta stories now?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, the whole this whole crisis has just accelerated the change. Print was, I wouldn't say dying, because I don't think print is ever going to die, but it was, magazine culture is definitely dying. And, you know, I've worked in magazines for many years of my life, and I've sat in offices with the deadlines and the excitement and this, and I will miss that, and it's sad. But we need to move on for that and look to the future. Print will not die. Print will get more rarefied, more collectible. The pages will get heavy again and thick and glossy and curated, and they'll be put together with care. It'll be a total pivot on throwaway culture, is my hope. And what I've been thinking about quite a lot in the recent days with all the magazine closures is all these amazingly talented people out there. The editors, the sub-editors, the designers, the photographers, the recipe developers, all these incredible people with so much talent without a job. So I'm hoping that all that talent is going to be redirected into online. Because for me, I mean, personally myself, I've never had a blog because I've always liked the idea of having an editor who reads my work and gives me feedback. I like the idea of having a sub-editor. I like the idea of having a fact checker. I like that there are gatekeepers. And I think the online space is a bit tricky. Sure, you have newspapers and magazines online that do have editors and fact checkers, but they're a rarity. I'm hoping that the gatekeeping aspect of print comes more into online, because it comes back to that word we keep talking about, trust. We're all going to want to trust our content, and we're all going to want that multi-layered, rich editorial experience you get from print online. So that's my hope. As for TikTok, you know what, there's going to be another TikTok tomorrow. I mean, you just mentioned Periscope earlier. I forgot about that one. Or Vine, or this and that. And I think, we need to not shy away from these things. We need to see if they work for us in our business and in our brand, and then apply it. But if not, you know what, there's another one around the corner, and then maybe embrace that one. And then, sorry, just back to print. Something that I feel like is quite important is that we need support for writing in general. We need investment, we need support, we need people that believe in good content. Here in South Africa, we don't even have a senior wine writers award. We used to a couple of years ago, but that just fell away. Now we only have a junior. And that's probably, going to fall away too. Overseas, the Louis Riderer, this is their last year of doing their wine writers awards. So there's that kind of like pullback of support from writers. And I think that's something we need to really think about, because journalists and writers and our content creators, they shape our world for us. And if we're not investing into that, then it's going to become lower and lower quality. And my fear is of losing the quality and scaring away talent.
Absolutely. And Felicity, this is a topic close to your heart as well, I know, and we speak about this often. And you're an incredible storyteller yourself. Someone just said in the chat group earlier as well, that all platforms are not for everybody, obviously. And I think sometimes we think we've got to be everywhere and got to tick all the boxes. And if someone else is on TikTok, we've got to be on TikTok. If print is dead, what now? What are your thoughts, on what Malu has just said, and also in terms of the move to online and social media content?
Well, actually, I completely agree with what was just said about print, and print becoming much more higher quality and a luxury product. We're already beginning to see that. The media, I mean, I've been following the incredible media layoffs that have been happening in the last couple of weeks, and it's completely breaking my heart. In terms of the wine media is the global wine media is surprisingly cashed up, because for the last decade, a lot of the money has been coming from competitions and events and so on. And so the wine magazines that have managed to get through the last crisis are actually in a really good position. So the wine media is probably not going anywhere. When it comes to the travel media, what we're seeing in media in general is a complete bifurcation into a superstar economy and then everybody else. So we're seeing the really big people, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of those things are getting stronger as they're the last men standing, and so everybody subscribes since they get bigger and bigger. Good luck trying to get the attention of the New York Times if you're a small player. The other group of people that are going to come in is we're going to see a lot more pay to play and a lot more advertorial, and I think that is something that the wine industry and the tourism industry should try and resist as much as possible. I think we could be facing, if everybody gives into this, we could be facing a dystopian world where you'll only get mentioned if you pay somebody to come and talk about you and stuff like that. And more brighter, I really think paying for coverage is something that people should try not to get involved in. The other thing though is I am seeing that with so many journalists who are unemployed, just in the last couple of weeks, I can't tell you how many people have contacted me saying, I'd really like to start my own publication. Are you interested? There's a lot of very high quality professionals who are actually starting their own things. So in the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to start to see a whole new generation of really high quality, interesting things coming up. But what's going to be different about them from the ones that exist at the moment is everybody knows that the advertising model is dead. So the publications of the future that are going to exist are ones that are going to be reader supported, and that's going to be a challenge, because it means that they're going to tell the absolute unvarnished truth without any without any care about what advertisers think or whether they're being paid or not. So it's going to be very, very interesting times. But I don't think the media is going to vanish. We need it too much. It's just morphing into something completely different.
Interesting. Kash, I know you commented on this chat group that you don't think necessarily TikTok is appropriate for wineries and wine brands. And again, I think, so much is how we perceive the category of wine to be and what it's not. And we had a really interesting conversation earlier the week about the importance of breaking wine down and bringing it down to earth and having fun with it. We've also seen that during this lockdown, a lot of women my age and even older are having a go at TikTok, and some less successful than others. And yes, it's the territory of the young. But, should there be so many rules and also social media? It's not for everybody. It's not for all brands. What's your advice to us?
I think we get too obsessed and hung up with the medium. Every day there's every year there's a new social media poster child. TikTok, next year who knows what it'll be. Last year or 2 years ago was Periscope. I think the most important thing we have to keep reminding ourselves, there are many ways to tell our story, but the most important thing is our story. Let's focus on the message we're trying to tell. Let's try and tell an exciting story. Let's try and think a bit different outside of the box. Then we can worry about the platforms later. But first of all, what is it's a good time for experimentation. I think this is a great time to experiment while people still are at home and still not traveling. It's a good time to experiment and try different ideas. Like we've seen this huge boom in virtual wine tours and wine tastings. As we said, that a glass of wine is the opening line to so many great stories and conversations. So let's use that glass of wine. Let's send bottles of wine to influencers and content creators and journalists around the world. And let's do a virtual meetup here on Zoom. And let's talk about travel, South Africa, and having a glass of wine. There's so many things that wine can mix well with. So let's be bold, let's be creative. Let's not worry about the medium.
Exactly. And that is really what it is. It's a medium. The story is where it's at. And we shouldn't try and be everything to everybody. For some of us, it's not appropriate. For others, it is appropriate. It fits our brand. It doesn't fit our brand. These days, a while ago, we thought it's inappropriate to drink wine from a can. I love the idea of drinking wine from a can because not everybody in my household drinks wine. So there's so many taboos and so many things that we think is appropriate and not appropriate. And I think it ultimately comes down to what's a good fit. And also, where is our audience at? Who is it that we want to reach? And where are they? Where are the eyeballs? Where are the conversations happening that we should be part of? And right in the beginning of this conversation, we spoke about the importance of email and that database that we've been sitting on and for so long and that we're not utilizing properly. The visitor that's just around the corner, and that we are more worried about the international visitor than the guy that's just an hour away from us or even 20 minutes away from us. So direct sales is definitely where the conversation is at. And as we start wrapping up this afternoon, I want to just hear a few final thoughts from you guys. Pamela, from a tour operator perspective, a lot of the conversations have been about wineries and brands from that side, but how are you gearing yourself up? Before I go into the rest and ask everybody for a final thought for this afternoon, and if there's anybody from the attendees side that have got a final question to pose to us, you're very welcome to pop that up onto our screens. Pamela, what do you think is the future of online tour operators and travel agencies? And do you think people are going to want to have a more personalized experience and want to know who's at the end of the screen, who they're booking with?
Basically, I think you had a lot of people who just very recently had a very bad experience with going with the mass online travel booking services like bookings.com, Expedia. People were abandoned all over the world. The companies were unable to respond. Whether they wanted to respond, people got stuck. So we're back to, it's quite a high risk time to travel. No one's going to want to go with someone who's going to abandon them everywhere. You need the trust level. So even more so than a direct booking at the moment, I'm very, very lucky because I've worked with some tour operators who plan trips to South Africa and have done so for 20 years plus. And now is the time that if you are someone who plans travel from overseas, you have the reputation, you're smaller, you're more responsive, and I think people are going to want to pay that little bit extra to know that they can trust the whole system all the way through, from that you're going to have looked at the flights. The safari experiences, I think, are going to be really sought after. If you're going to be prepared to fly out here, people want space, people want nature, they are small numbers. Nobody wants mass tourism. And of course, here in the Cape, it goes, or South Africa, the two go hand in hand. If you're going to come to South Africa, the first thing you do is you do safari, and then you do the Cape Town experience, and usually with the winelands. So the two are going to marry. It's going to be less about doing stuff inside the Cape Town area, but we have fantastic, fantastic potential out in our wine region at the moment as to that people will be able to find the space out there. And once again, we'll be able to keep building those relationships going forward. And yes, if it becomes easier for those people to actually buy the wine going forward, you'll have ambassadors forevermore. It's been really, really, really difficult for a lot of our clients to purchase wine. You literally, a lot of the places, they say, well, sorry, we haven't sorted something for your territory. You can order through the courier companies and pay, you know, the $200 and something for 6 bottles to get back to your territory. So yes, direct sales would be wonderful. And I think with everyone going more online and facilitating, I think collaborations into the future would make it incredible. I was really excited to hear that people are getting together and doing their own sales in England. And hopefully we get a bigger takeoff of that, because then the consumer will be able to get our wines much more easily over there, and would be able to continue the relationship created while we've gotten them to fall in love with this region, to then continue purchasing the wines once they're back home.
Thank you for that, Pamela. Marybeth, from your side, I mean, we've ended every session with a message of hope and inspiration. And I think there's so many small businesses that are sitting in blind panic right now. What would be your message to the industry in terms of the future and what they should be focusing on over the next few weeks?
Great work only comes out of great tension. And we have to invent the new status quo. None of us know exactly where it's going to be, but we're all going to create it. And we will do that collaboratively. There's so much leaning into each other right now. You see it on social media all the time. And I think the nurture economy is very powerful. And I think as a result of the proliferation of communication, this inflation of communication, before TikTok, before the pandemic, there was already a shift toward curation. People want to be part of communities, and they want to be talked to in communities, and they want to receive information that's really relevant for them. And that's where newsletters come in and can be very powerful. And I'm not talking about your winery's newsletter. Of course, that it should also be one of your communication tactics. But there's amazing curated content out of there, precisely because there are furloughs in newsroom. And you have incredibly talented content creators, writers, editors, producing amazing content. So my message is, know who you want to sell your wine to. Create a micro market and create content that's useful to them. And make sure you have them on your team. Make sure that you are surrounding yourself with that, so that the values are authentic. And when they see the material you're creating, it resonates with them.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's a small groups.
Absolutely. Small, intimate groups and more personalized. I love that. Kash, from your side, I hope to reconnect with you again in person soon. But in the meantime, what would be some of your last takeouts to share with our attendees?
I would say that there is a lot of love in the room, in the world for South Africa. There's a lot of people like me who have had some of their best travel memories in your country, and they're all like me, dying to come back to see you again. And all you have to do is activate that love and that nostalgia that people feel for South Africa at the moment. And all you have to do is simply send a case of wonderful wine, and then let them create amazing content in whatever formats they have, and let them be the ambassadors of your story. That's all you got to do, is empower and trust. And yeah, I think there is so much love and support out there for South Africa, including for people like me. So all you got to do is just give us the keys, and we'll do the rest.
I love that. I love that. Let it loose. Malu, from your side, a final thought.
My final thought, I would say, is that a lot of these words, authenticity, transparency, trust, they can be quite buzzwordy. And I think if I'm a winery and I'm listening to this, I want to know, well, what do you mean? How do I do that? And I think I want to share an anecdote from my own life. A couple of days before lockdown, I needed to get a headshot taken for something I'm doing. And I was going to go to a local wine bar with a glass of wine and pose for the photo, you know, and that was going to be my headshot. And a friend of mine said to me, why are you doing that? You don't go to wine bars. You've got 2 small children. I mean, it's not you. So I said, well, what do you mean? She said, take the photo in your writing shed where you write with your computer and your bottles of wine and your books, and show them who you are. And I thought that was incredibly good advice, because I did do that and I loved the photo, but it told a story. That's authenticity. It's not something you have to fake. It's, you know, me going to the wine bar. I never go to wine bar. It's just not something that happens. So that's my piece of advice. Look at who you are, show them your guts and your glory, and that's how you craft an authentic story.
I love that. Felicity, from your side.
Well, I think the thing that I have 2 things to say. One is that what we've learned from this crisis is how much people all over the world care about wine. Everybody who's got an online shop has seen sales go up 250%, 700%. It turns out that this little industry of love that's very low margin, that nobody can make money in, turns out to be the industry that everybody turned to in a crisis. So I think it's we're really well placed for the future. I would say, though, that there's going to be some tough times ahead in the next couple of years. So the best thing that everyone can do is not to panic, but to counterintuitively start investing money in their digital, and do it really well. There's a lot of really great people who would love a project like this at the moment. Think about logistics, think about the practicalities. And my final piece of advice is that the other thing that's happened from this pandemic is everybody wants natural. I think everybody is sick and tired of living virtually. And so the wine industry being able to offer that, and to be able to offer something that you can see and touch, isn't going to be an absolute gold mine in the future. In the short term, though, I would take any pictures of parties, crowds, or lots of people tasting off your website. At the moment, everybody wants to think about safety and being out in nature. So take away any pictures of crowds. That's my final piece of advice.
I love that. Very practical as always, Felicity. Thank you for that. So I'm sure you've got a whole lot of wineries running to their website as we speak, taking off that banner of a big party and replacing it with space and solitude and silence and everything that we're nurturing for. Mashudu, from your side, you are well placed. As Felicity said, small businesses now need to reach out to people who are creative and problem solvers. You're a problem solver if there was anyone. What would you be doing right now for small businesses and inspiring them to get online? And just share a few final thoughts with us and tell us again where people can reach you, so that we can get wineries to get online and start selling not just their wine, but their story online.
Cool. I'd just like to say I learned a lot from all the panelists. I thought it was really, really empowering. I hope everyone else learned the same. I think people should not be scared of digital channels, whatever medium you choose. Just give it a chance. Be patient and really just test and learn as much as possible. And that's the one thing about digital channels and digital platforms that is very empowering for the people that are using them. Is you have the opportunity to test and learn as much as possible, and learn as much as possible in the shortest amount of time, and just do as much as you can to learn as much as possible about the platforms that you're using, the mediums that you're using, and also the community that you're trying to build, because I think that's always going to be the most important part of what you're trying to do. Again, that link for building an online store is compass.africa. So we've built an entire guide on how to build an online store and what you can use it for. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. Just try and embrace the uncertainty and start to test and learn as much as possible, and adapt and learn as much as possible.
Thank you for that. And thank you again for everybody for joining us. Just, it's been a really enriching few days, and just filled with hope, I think. You know, as entrepreneurs and as pioneers and rule breakers, we've never had any certainty in any case. We have operated in an uncertain world forever, and this is no different. The magnitude of this crisis reaches all of us, and our worlds are upside down, but I believe that we will be able to shape a future from this, and it's up to us to work together, to continue to share insights and learnings, reach out to each other. This is, after all, a human pandemic, and we need to solve it by being human and being more real. Marybeth, just from your side.
I just wanted to add one more closing note. If I can help you in any way, no matter how small, no matter how big your winery is, I am more than happy to help, and I am not the only one. If you need help from anyone in this industry, now is the time to ask. So speak up. We are all here for you.
Exactly. Don't go silent. Thank you to all the attendees from all over the world. I know a lot of people have asked us, when are you doing this again? Who knows? Watch the space, follow us at Destinate, and keep up to date in terms of new developments. Don't be afraid. Make sure that you get out of that panic, because if we're in that panic, we can't create and innovate. And what we need to do now is innovate, take hands, and solve the challenges together. We hopefully look forward to welcome you sooner than later to the Cape Winelands and to South Africa. And I certainly can't wait to get on an aeroplane and visit some of the incredible wine regions that have joined us from all over the world. Thank you, everybody, for making this possible. We'll be in touch and share the recordings and the takeouts with you within the next few days.